first time Marcus saw Lena smile after he got out, really smile, it wasn't the homecoming he'd pictured for 10 years. It was across a courtroom, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, reflecting off the cheap wood veneer of the witness stand. She wasn't looking at him, not directly. She was looking at the judge, maybe the ceiling, maybe something only she could see. And then the prosecutor read the text message aloud, the one she sent her sister the night before Marcus's welcome home dinner. "Tonight's the night, payback." And Lena, she chuckled, a dry, brittle sound that cracked the courtroom silence. Then it grew, louder, higher, until she was laughing, head thrown back, tears streaming down her face, but the sound pure, horrifying mirth. The bailiff took a step towards her. Her own lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. Marcus just sat there, hands cuffed in his lap this time. Not for the crime that sent him away, but as a participant in this new, bewildering horror show. The laughter echoed the diagnosis ringing in his ears, the doctor's careful words just weeks before. "Marcus, the test came back positive. For HIV. 10 years. 10 years dreaming of walking free, of seeing Lena's face without plexiglass between them, of rebuilding a life torched by his own stupidity. He'd paid his debt, done the time. He thought release meant a clean slate. He never imagined the welcome home present would be a death sentence, delivered with a smile. Rewind the tape. 10 years earlier, Marcus wasn't a bad guy, not really. That's what people said anyway. He was just weak, chasing easy money. Got caught up in a check-kiting scheme that snowballed, pulling down a couple of local businesses with it. No violence, no drugs, just greed and bad choices. The judge called it a betrayal of community trust. He sentenced him to 15 years, eligible for parole in 10. Lena stood beside him during the sentencing, stoic, pale. She squeezed his hand once before they took him away. Her eyes held a universe of emotions he couldn't decipher then. Fear, anger, confusion, maybe even pity. He promised he'd make it up to her. He wrote letters, hundreds of them, filled with remorse, plans for the future, declarations of love. Her replies were shorter, less frequent as the years crawled by. He chalked it up to the difficulty of her life now, working 2 jobs, dealing with the whispers, the sideways glances in their neighborhood, raising their young son, Darius, alone. "It's hard, Mark," she'd write. "People look at me like I did something wrong." He felt the guilt gnaw at him. He'd ruined her life too. Visits became strained. Darius, initially excited to see his dad, grew quiet, distant, mirroring his mother's guardedness. The plexiglass felt thicker each time. "He's struggling in school," Lena mentioned once, her voice flat. "Teachers say he's angry." Marcus tried to talk to the boy, offer advice. But what could a man behind bars really offer? He focused on his release date, marking off days on a hidden calendar. He took anger management classes, got his GED, worked in the prison library. He was determined to be the man Lena deserved when he got out. He imagined their reunion constantly. Tears, forgiveness, a slow rebuilding. He pictured Darius, a teenager now, maybe resistant at first, but eventually warming up. He'd get a job, any job, stay clean, prove himself. The parole board saw the effort. They saw the remorse. They granted his release on the first possible date. Walking out of those gates felt like shedding a skin. The air tasted different. The sunlight felt warmer. His caseworker helped him find temporary housing, a condition of his parole, but Lena had insisted he come home first. "Just for a bit," she'd said on the phone, her voice oddly bright. "Let Darius see you settling back in. We'll have a proper welcome dinner." Hope, dangerous and fragile, bloomed in his chest. He bought her flowers, cheap ones from a gas station, but the gesture felt important. He practiced his apology speech 100 times on the bus ride back to the old neighborhood. He was ready to start over. He was ready for forgiveness. He had no idea Lena had spent 10 years cultivating a different kind of plan. The apartment felt smaller, suffocatingly so, or maybe he'd just gotten used to the enforced emptiness of a cell. Lena had kept it clean, obsessively clean, but it lacked warmth. The photos on the mantel were mostly of Darius. School pictures, awkward teenage poses. Only one small, faded picture of him and Lena, taken years before his incarceration, remained, tucked behind a newer frame of her and her sister. Darius, now 16, mumbled a hello and disappeared into his room, the door clicking shut with finality. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Lena busied herself in the kitchen, her movements jerky. "Dinner's almost ready," she said, not looking at him. "Just lasagna. Hope you still like it." Marcus tried to bridge the gap. "It smells amazing, Lena. Thank you for everything." He wanted to say more, to pour out the apologies rehearsed for a decade, but the timing felt wrong. Her smile was tight, painted on. "We'll talk later, Mark. Let's just try to have a normal dinner." Normal. The word felt alien. Nothing about this was normal. He was a stranger in his own home, his own life. During dinner, the silence was broken only by the clinking of forks. Darius ate quickly, eyes glued to his phone beneath the table. Lena picked at her food. Marcus complimented the lasagna again, desperate for connection. "It's really good, just like I remember." Lena finally met his eyes. There was something cold in them, something he hadn't seen before, or maybe hadn't wanted to see. "Things change, Marcus. People change." The words hung there. Later, after Darius had retreated back to his room and the dishes were cleared, Lena poured them both wine. Cheap red. She sat across from him at the small kitchen table. "So," she began, swirling the wine in her glass. 10 years. What was it like? He hesitated, unsure what she wanted to hear. The brutality, the boredom, the fear. "It was hard," he said lamely. "I thought about you, about Darius. Every day." She took a long sip. "Did you?" Her voice was soft, almost conversational but laced with an edge. "Because I thought about you too. Every time I had to explain to Darius why his dad wasn't coming to his baseball game. Every time the landlord threatened eviction because I was short on rent. Every time someone whispered jailbird's wife behind my back." Her gaze sharpened. "Every single damn day, Marcus." He flinched. "Lena, I am so sorry. I know I messed up. I destroyed everything, but I'm back now. I want to fix it. I'll get a job. I'll support you. I'll earn back your trust." He reached across the table, wanting to touch her hand, but she pulled away slightly. "Earn it back?" She laughed, that same brittle sound he'd hear again in court. "You think it's that easy? 10 years, Marcus. You vanished. I was here, picking up the pieces you shattered." Her voice started to rise. "Do you have any idea what it was like? The loneliness, the struggle, wondering if you even cared?" "I cared," he insisted, his own voice rising. "I wrote. I called when I could. Letters?" She scoffed. "Empty words on paper. You weren't here." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing now. "You think a few apologies wipe the slate clean? You think you can just walk back in and play happy families?" The intensity stunned him. He'd expected anger, resentment, but this felt different, deeper, colder. He didn't know then that the welcome dinner, the strained conversation, it was all part of the script she'd written, the first act of her revenge play. That night she led him to the bedroom. The room felt different too, her clothes dominating the closet, his few remaining things shoved into a box in the corner. He felt a surge of hope mixed with anxiety. Maybe this was the reconciliation he craved. Maybe intimacy could bridge the chasm between them. He was clumsy, hesitant, his body remembering hers even as his mind raced with a decade of separation and guilt. She was passive at first, then surprisingly eager, pulling him closer. He mistook it for forgiveness, for a rekindling. He fell asleep afterwards, feeling a fragile sense of peace, the first in years. He didn't see the look in her eyes as she watched him sleep, a look of chilling resolve. He didn't know the intimacy wasn't about connection. It was the delivery mechanism. The fatigue hit him first, bone-deep exhaustion that clung to him like prison grime. He blamed it on the stress of readjusting, the frantic job search, the parole check-ins, the constant tension coiling in the small apartment. He was working odd jobs, landscaping, washing dishes, anything to bring in some money, prove he was trying. Lena remained distant, oscillating between icy civility and sudden sharp bursts of anger over minor things, leaving his shoes by the door, forgetting to buy milk. Darius barely spoke to him. Marcus felt like he was suffocating, trapped in a different kind of prison. Then came the night sweats, soaking the cheap sheets Lena had bought for his side of the bed. A persistent cough followed, racking his body. He lost weight, the pounds melting off his already lean frame. "You look like hell, Mark," Lena commented one morning, stirring her coffee, her tone neutral. "Maybe you caught something." He brushed it off. A bad cold, maybe the flu. He couldn't afford to be sick. He had to work, had to show his parole officer he was stable. But the symptoms worsened. Swollen glands in his neck, a strange rash appearing on his chest. Panic started to bubble beneath the surface. He remembered the health pamphlets in the prison library, the warnings about shared needles, unprotected sex. He hadn't done anything like that inside. He'd been careful. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the fatigue. He made an appointment at a free clinic downtown, using a fake name, paranoia overriding common sense. He couldn't risk his parole officer finding out he was seriously ill. The wait felt endless, surrounded by coughing patients and the smell of disinfectant. The doctor, a young woman with tired eyes, listened patiently to his list of symptoms. She ran some standard tests. Blood work. We should probably include an HIV test, just to rule everything out, she said casually. Marcus froze. HIV? Why? Not since. He trailed off, thinking of Lena. That first night back. It was the only time. It's standard procedure with these symptoms. The doctor reassured him gently. Probably just a nasty virus going around. We'll call you with the results in a few days. The waiting was agony. Every cough, every bead of sweat fueled the growing dread. He avoided Lena, retreating into himself, the silence in the apartment becoming a roaring pressure in his ears. The call came on a Tuesday morning while he was scrubbing grease traps at the diner. The clinic number flashed on his burner phone. He stepped outside, hands trembling. Mr. Smith? The nurse's voice was professional, detached. The doctor needs you to come in to discuss your test results. He knew. Before she said another word, he knew. He hung up, leaning against the grimy brick wall, the city sounds fading into a dull roar. Discuss the results. That meant positive. He walked back inside, told his boss he was sick, and stumbled out into the street, heading not to the clinic, but towards the apartment. He needed to see Lena. He needed answers. The walk felt miles long, his legs like lead. When he reached the door, he hesitated. What if he was wrong? What if it was just a virus? But the certainty settled deep in his gut, cold and heavy. He let himself in. Lena was on the sofa, watching daytime TV, a blank expression on her face. She looked up, startled. Mark, what are you doing home? He didn't answer. He just stood there looking at her. The woman he'd loved, the woman he'd hurt, the woman who held the key to this new nightmare. Lena, he finally said, his voice hoarse. We need to talk. I went to the doctor. Her expression flickered. Just a tiny shift, almost imperceptible. But he saw it. Fear? No. Something else. Something closer to satisfaction. Are you okay? She asked, her voice laced with fake concern. No, Lena, I'm not okay. He took a step closer. They think I have HIV. He watched her face, searching for shock, denial, anything. She just stared back, her eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, deliberately, she switched off the television. The silence amplified. And, she asked softly, and what? He choked out, disbelief warring with dawning horror. That first night. I know, she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. I know, Marcus. The world tilted. He staggered back, grabbing the doorframe for support. You knew? You knew you had it? And you didn't tell me? She finally stood up, walking towards him, stopping a few feet away. Her eyes, clear and steady, met his. I got tested about 3 years ago, she stated calmly, as if discussing the weather. It doesn't matter how. Point is, I knew. And you slept with me? Knowing? The words were barely a whisper. You deserved it, Marcus. She spat, the calmness shattering, replaced by a venom that chilled him to the bone. You took 10 years of my life. You destroyed everything we had. You left me alone to raise our son, to face the shame. What's a little virus compared to that? Consider it payback. Payback. The word from the text message. It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise she had kept. The air crackled with the fallout of her confession. Marcus stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman standing before him. Cold, vengeful, deliberate, with the Lena he thought he knew. The Lena he had hurt, but still, somewhere deep down, loved. Payback? He repeated, the word tasting like ash. Lena, this isn't payback. This is my life. This is permanent. So was what you did to me. She shot back, her voice trembling with years of suppressed fury. You think prison was the only sentence being served? I served one out here every single day, watching Darius ask where his father was, working dead-end jobs, being pitied, being judged, while you sat in your cell writing your pathetic letters about how sorry you were. He flinched as if struck. I was sorry, I am sorry, I wanted to make things right. Make things right? She laughed again, that same chilling sound. There's no making this right, Marcus. You break something, it stays broken. You ripped our life apart. I just returned the favor. Returned the favor. The calculated cruelty of it stole his breath. He thought back to that first night, her manufactured eagerness. It wasn't passion. It was predation. How could you? He whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. How could you be so hateful? You taught me how, she said, her eyes glittering with unshed tears but her expression hard as granite. 10 years is a long time to learn. He sank onto the edge of the sofa, his head in his hands. The diagnosis, the betrayal, the sheer malice of it, it was too much. He felt the foundations of his fragile new beginning crumble into dust. What now? Go to the police, tell his parole officer? Risk being sent back to prison for violating what? Being sick? Being a victim? The irony was suffocating. Lena watched him, her arms crossed, a strange mix of triumph and emptiness in her eyes. What are you going to do, Marcus? She asked, her voice regaining its cool composure. Run to the cops? Tell them your ex-con wife gave you HIV? Who do you think they'll believe? Who do you think they'll care about? He looked up, seeing the trap she'd laid. She was right. He was damaged goods, an ex-felon. She was the wronged wife, the struggling single mother. The narrative was already written in her favor, but the thought of letting her get away with it, of carrying this devastating secret while she walked free, ignited a spark of defiance in the wreckage of his despair. I don't know what I'm going to do, he said slowly, meeting her gaze. But you won't get away with this, Lena. This isn't over. Her composure wavered slightly. Maybe she hadn't expected him to fight back. Maybe she thought the diagnosis would break him completely. He stood up, shaky but determined. I need to get out of here. He walked towards the door, turning back one last time. You didn't just infect me, Lena. You infected everything. Our son. Whatever memory was left of us. You poisoned it all. He left, closing the door softly behind him, the click echoing the finality of it all. He walked aimlessly for hours, ending up back at the clinic. He told the doctor everything, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain and disbelief. She listened patiently, her expression shifting from professional concern to quiet horror. She explained the legalities, the difficulty of proving intent, the resources available to him. For the first time since his release, Marcus didn't feel entirely alone. The clinic connected him with a legal aid lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah Chen, who specialized in difficult cases. Sarah listened intently as Marcus recounted the story, her pen scratching notes furiously. Okay, Marcus, she said when he finished, her voice firm. This is horrific, and Lena's counting on you being too scared or too broken to fight back. We need concrete proof of intent. That text message she sent her sister? Tonight's the night, payback. That's our smoking gun if we can get it. The investigation began. Detectives, initially skeptical given Marcus's record, started digging, prompted by Sarah Chen's persistence and the clinic doctor's testimony about Marcus's distraught state. They subpoenaed Lena's phone records. They interviewed her sister, who reluctantly confirmed receiving the text, claiming she thought Lena was just venting, blowing off steam. Neighbors were interviewed, painting a picture of Lena as a struggling mother, yes, but also as someone who had grown increasingly bitter and isolated over the years. One neighbor recalled Lena saying something chilling months before Marcus's release. He thinks he's coming home to sunshine and roses. He has no idea. The pieces started fitting together. Lena hadn't just snapped, she had plotted. She had waited 10 years, nurturing her grievance, letting it fester until it twisted into a weapon. The media got wind of the story, fueled by leaked court documents and anonymous sources. Convict claims wife intentionally infected him with HIV, screamed the tabloid headlines. Revenge plot or ex-con's lie, debated cable news pundits. Marcus found himself thrust back into a spotlight he desperately wanted to avoid. His past dredged up, his character dissected, his victimhood questioned. Lena, meanwhile, maintained her innocence publicly, portraying herself as the grieving wife, terrified of her vengeful ex-husband. But behind closed doors, the evidence was mounting. The case against Lena wasn't straightforward. Proving intentional transmission of HIV is notoriously difficult. It required demonstrating not only that she knew her status, but that she specifically intended to infect Marcus and understood the potentially lethal consequences. Her defense attorney, a slick, expensive lawyer likely funded by a sympathetic relative or a second mortgage, argued vehemently that the encounter was consensual, that Marcus knew the risks inherent in unprotected sex, and that Lena, traumatized by years of hardship and Marcus's past crimes, was the real victim. They painted Marcus as unreliable, a desperate ex-con trying to deflect blame and gain sympathy, perhaps even seeking financial compensation. Mr. Reyes comes to you with a story, Lena's lawyer boomed during pre-trial motions, gesturing towards Marcus. A lurid tale designed to vilify a woman already victimized by his criminal actions. He expects you to believe that this dedicated mother, this pillar of resilience, suddenly transformed into a monster overnight. It defies logic. It defies reason. Sarah Chen, Marcus's legal aid lawyer, countered forcefully. It defies reason only if you ignore a decade of simmering resentment, financial hardship, and emotional isolation directly caused by Mr. Reyes's actions, yes, but twisted by Ms. Rodriguez into justification for an act of profound violence. Her own words, texted to her sister, "Tonight's the night, payback," reveal her mindset. Her actions that night confirm her intent. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment lapse. It was a calculated strike. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Henderson, a man known for his meticulous approach, built the case brick by brick. Medical records confirmed Lena's diagnosis 3 years prior. Friends testified to her increasing bitterness towards Marcus in the year leading up to his release. The sister's reluctant testimony about the text message was crucial. Cell tower records placed Lena's phone near the clinic where she was diagnosed multiple times, corroborating her knowledge of her status. But the defense kept hammering away at Marcus's credibility. They brought up his original fraud conviction repeatedly. They suggested he could have contracted the virus elsewhere, perhaps even in prison, despite his denials and lack of evidence. They tried to muddy the waters, create reasonable doubt. Marcus had to testify. Sitting on the stand facing Lena across the courtroom was harder than anything he'd endured in prison. He recounted his hopes for release, the awkward reunion, the dinner, the intimacy he mistook for forgiveness, the dawning horror of his symptoms, and Lena's cold confession. He spoke quietly, his voice thick with emotion, but steady. He refused to look away from Lena, even when her lawyer's cross-examination became brutal. "Mr. Reyes, isn't it true you pressured Ms. Rodriguez for sex that night?" "No, sir." "Isn't it true you were drinking heavily?" "We shared some wine." "Isn't it true you have a history of deceit, of manipulating situations for your own gain?" "I made terrible mistakes, sir. I served 10 years for them. This is different." "Different how?" "Perhaps you contracted this disease through your own reckless behavior after your release and needed someone to blame. I was diagnosed weeks after my release. The only person I was intimate with was Lena." He saw a flicker of something in Lena's eyes then. Not remorse, but perhaps fear. The relentless questioning, the cold presentation of facts, seemed to be chipping away at her defiant facade. The trial dragged on for weeks. Darius was called by the defense, a tormented figure caught between his parents. He testified that his mother had struggled immensely, that his father's absence had deeply affected their lives. But under cross-examination, he admitted his mother had become increasingly angry and withdrawn, often saying things like, "Your father will get what he deserves." It was heartbreaking, watching the boy navigate the impossible loyalty bind. The media circus intensified. News vans camped outside the courthouse. Online forums exploded with opinions, largely divided along lines of sympathy, for the wronged wife or the punished ex-con seeking a second chance. Marcus felt like an exhibit, his pain, his illness, his past failures dissected for public consumption. He retreated further, speaking only to Sarah Chen and his parole officer, focusing solely on getting through each day, each court appearance. He started attending a support group for people living with HIV, finding solace in shared experiences. But the betrayal by Lena remained a uniquely poisonous element in his struggle. He was fighting not just a virus but the ghost of the life he thought he could rebuild. The moment that would define the trial, the image seared into public memory, came during the prosecution's closing arguments. Ada Henderson stood before the jury, his voice quiet but firm. He recapped the evidence, the diagnosis Lena hid, the text message confirming premeditation, the testimonies painting a picture of calculated revenge. He pointed towards Lena, sitting beside her lawyer, her face pale but composed. "Lena Rodriguez will tell you she was a victim," Henderson said, his voice rising slightly. "A victim of circumstance, a victim of her husband's crimes, a victim of loneliness. And she was. No one denies the hardship she endured. But hardship does not grant a license for vengeance. It does not justify inflicting a potential death sentence on another human being, especially someone pleading for forgiveness, someone trying to rebuild." He paused, letting the silence hang. She didn't just want him to suffer. She wanted him to suffer slowly. She wanted him to live with the consequences, just as she felt she had lived with the consequences of his actions. She chose a weapon that would last a lifetime. That wasn't justice. It wasn't even revenge. It was cruelty, pure and simple. He then displayed the text message on the large screen again. "Tonight's the night. Payback. Payback," Henderson repeated, turning back to the jury. Delivered not with a fist or a weapon found in the heat of the moment, but with calculated intimacy. A betrayal so profound, it's difficult to comprehend. It was then, as Henderson detailed the lifelong implications of an HIV diagnosis, the medical regimen, the social stigma, the constant awareness of mortality, that Lena's composure finally cracked. It started subtly, a tremor in her clasped hands, a tightening of her jaw. Then, as Henderson described Marcus's physical deterioration before the diagnosis, his confusion, his fear, a sound escaped her. A choked sob? A gasp? No. It was the beginning of that same horrifying chuckle Marcus had heard in the courtroom months earlier. It started low, a guttural noise that made heads turn. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm, whispering urgently, but she seemed not to notice. The chuckle grew into a full-blown laugh, echoing strangely in the tense room. It wasn't joyful. It was jagged, hysterical, tinged with madness, or perhaps absolute defiance. Tears streamed down her face, but the sound was one of bitter, broken amusement. "Payback," she sputtered between laughs, loud enough for the jury, the judge, everyone to hear. He got what he deserved." The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Order in the court! Ms. Rodriguez, control yourself. Counsel, control your client." The bailiff moved towards her again. Her lawyer looked mortified, trying to restrain her gently. But the image was indelible. Lena Rodriguez, laughing hysterically while the consequences of her actions were laid bare. It wasn't the laugh of a calculating villain, perhaps, but something more disturbing, the sound of a psyche completely fractured by years of bitterness, finally imploding under pressure. Or maybe, some whispered later, it was the ultimate performance, a final, desperate attempt to appear unhinged, less culpable. Whatever the reason, the impact on the jury was palpable. Their faces registered shock, confusion, and revulsion. The laughter sealed her fate more effectively than any piece of evidence. Marcus watched, numb. He felt no triumph, only a profound sadness. This wreck of a woman was the same person he had once loved, the mother of his child. Her laughter wasn't a victory cry. It was the sound of utter self-destruction. He thought of Darius, wondering how the boy would ever recover from this public, painful implosion of his family. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. The verdict came back. Guilty. Guilty of aggravated assault. Guilty of reckless endangerment. Guilty of the specific state statute related to knowingly exposing another person to HIV. As the foreperson read the verdict, Lena stood motionless, the laughter gone, replaced by a chilling emptiness. She didn't look at Marcus, she didn't look at anyone. She just stared straight ahead, a hollow statue in the eye of the storm she had created. Sentencing day arrived, cloaked in the same media frenzy that had surrounded the trial. Marcus sat in the gallery this time, not at the defendant's table. He wasn't required to be there, but Sarah Chen had advised it, saying his presence mattered. He wasn't sure why he came. Closure felt like a distant, impossible concept. He felt drained, the adrenaline of the trial replaced by a weary understanding of his new reality. His life was irrevocably altered, marked by daily medication, regular doctor visits, and the shadow of the virus. But the deeper scar was the betrayal, the knowledge that the person he had once trusted most had intentionally inflicted this upon him. Lena entered the courtroom flanked by guards, wearing standard-issue prison garb. The defiance was gone, replaced by a visible tremor. Her lawyer argued for leniency, citing the years of hardship, her lack of prior record, the psychological toll of Marcus's incarceration. He presented letters from friends, a tearful plea from her sister. He emphasized that Lena herself was living with HIV, suggesting prison would be a death sentence for her too. ADA Henderson countered, arguing for a substantial sentence that reflected the severity and calculated nature of the crime. This was not a moment of passion, he stated firmly. This was a meticulously planned act of vengeance with devastating lifelong consequences for the victim, Mr. Reyes. The sentence must send a message that using a disease as a weapon will not be tolerated. Then Marcus was given the opportunity to make a victim impact statement. He hadn't prepared anything. He walked slowly to the podium, gripped its edges, and looked directly at Lena for the first time since the verdict. Her eyes darted away. "Your Honor," he began, his voice low but clear. 10 years ago, I made choices that cost me my freedom and hurt people I loved. I served my time. I came home wanting a second chance, to be a father, to make amends. He paused, swallowing hard. What Lena did, it took that chance away. It wasn't just about the virus, it was about the trust, about kicking a man when he was already down, trying to climb back up. He looked at Lena again, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You didn't just punish me, Lena. You punished yourself. You punished our son. There are no winners here. We all lost." He couldn't say more. The raw emotion choked him. He nodded to the judge and returned to his seat, ignoring the clicking cameras and muffled whispers. The judge, a stern-faced woman who had presided over the trial with quiet authority, took a long moment, reviewing the documents before her. She addressed Lena directly. "Ms. Rodriguez, the circumstances leading up to this case are undeniably tragic. The court acknowledges the suffering you endured during Mr. Reyes's incarceration. However, your actions upon his release were not those of a victim seeking solace, but of an individual deliberately inflicting grievous harm. The method you chose was particularly insidious, exploiting intimacy and trust to transmit a serious, incurable disease." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "Your laughter in this courtroom during the closing arguments spoke volumes, suggesting a disturbing lack of remorse or comprehension of the gravity of your actions. While your own health status complicates sentencing, it does not excuse the calculated nature of the assault." The sentence came down. 8 years. 8 years in state prison. Less than the maximum, perhaps acknowledging her circumstances, but a significant sentence nonetheless. Lena swayed slightly as the number was read out. No tears, no laughter this time, just a vacant stare. As guards led her away, her eyes briefly met Marcus's across the crowded room. There was no hatred in her gaze now, no anger, only emptiness, a hollowed-out space where love, then bitterness, then vengeance had resided. Marcus watched her go, feeling not satisfaction, but a profound, aching sorrow for the destruction they had wrought upon each other. The sentence wouldn't undo the infection. It wouldn't heal the betrayal. It wouldn't give Darius back his parents. It was just another chapter in a tragedy written by bad choices and fueled by festering hate. The courtroom cleared, the news crews packed up, chasing the next sensational story. Marcus walked out into the afternoon sun, blinking, feeling strangely adrift. Sarah Chen patted his arm. "You okay, Marcus?" He shook his head. "No, but maybe I will be." The legal battle was over, but his personal one was just beginning. He had to navigate life with HIV, a constant reminder of Lena's betrayal. He had to manage the side effects of the medication, the fear of opportunistic infections, the psychological weight of it all. He diligently attended his support group meetings, finding strength in community, in shared vulnerability. He continued working, saving money, determined to build something stable for himself, even if it wasn't the life he'd envisioned. His relationship with Darius remained the most complex piece. The trial had ripped the scabs off old wounds and created new ones. Darius was angry, at Marcus for the original crime, at Lena for her horrifying revenge, at the world for the impossible situation he was trapped in. Marcus tried to connect, showing up for school events when allowed by his parole, calling regularly, offering support without pressure. It was slow, painful work. Sometimes Darius would talk, railing against Lena, confused about Marcus. Other times he'd shut down completely. Marcus learned patience, learned to absorb the anger without reacting, understanding it was born of deep hurt. He focused on being consistently present, a stable force his son could eventually rely on, even if forgiveness was a long way off. He knew rebuilding that bond might take longer than his prison sentence had. The neighborhood whispers didn't disappear entirely, but they faded. People saw Marcus working hard, keeping his head down, attending his parole meetings, trying. Some offered tentative nods, small gestures of acceptance. Others still crossed the street. He learned to live with it. Lena's imprisonment was another strange echo in his life. He received occasional updates through her sister, who seemed torn between loyalty and shame. Lena wasn't doing well inside. She was withdrawn, depressed, refusing counseling. The reality of her actions, perhaps, had finally sunk in, leaving only despair. Marcus felt a pang of pity, quickly followed by the lingering sting of betrayal. He couldn't forget, couldn't forgive, not yet. Maybe never. His own past crime, the check-kiting scheme, felt like a distant prelude to this far darker drama. He'd paid his debt to society for that, but the price for Lena's revenge was being paid daily, in pills, in blood tests, in the vigilance required to stay healthy, in the cautious way he now approached any human connection. Trust, once broken so spectacularly, was a difficult thing to rebuild, both in others and in himself. He sometimes saw news clips online, rehashing the case with lurid headlines, HIV revenge wife, laughing killer. It felt like watching a distorted version of his own life, stripped of nuance, reduced to shocking sound bites. The reality was quieter, sadder, more complicated. It was the daily grind of survival, the slow work of healing, the tentative hope for a future less defined by trauma. Years passed. Marcus completed his parole without incident. He found steadier work as a handyman, his skills honed both before and during his incarceration proving useful. He moved into a small apartment of his own, meticulously clean, sparsely furnished. It wasn't the family home he once dreamed of reclaiming, but it was his. A space free from the ghosts of the past, mostly. His health stabilized. Advances in medication meant his viral load became undetectable, significantly reducing the risk of transmission and allowing him a near-normal life expectancy, provided he adhered strictly to his treatment. The shadow remained, but it no longer consumed him. He learned to manage it, to live alongside it. His relationship with Darius evolved slowly. The anger subsided, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Darius went to college studying social work, perhaps driven by the dysfunction he'd witnessed firsthand. They spoke regularly, the conversations less fraught, more focused on the future than the painful past. There were still difficult silences, topics carefully avoided, but a fragile bridge was being built. Marcus never visited Lena in prison. He couldn't. Her sister sometimes passed messages, apologies, explanations, rambling justifications. He never responded. Forgiveness felt like a mountain too high to climb. Acceptance was the best he could manage. Acceptance of what happened. Acceptance of his altered life. Acceptance that some wounds never fully heal. He started volunteering at the HIV support center, sharing his story, offering encouragement to newly diagnosed individuals grappling with fear and stigma. Helping others became a form of therapy, a way to extract meaning from the wreckage. He spoke about resilience, about managing the medical realities, but he rarely spoke about Lena. That part of the story remained locked away, too raw, too personal. Sometimes late at night, the courtroom scene would flash in his mind, Lena's face contorted in that horrifying laugh. He'd see the prosecutors, the jury, his own reflection in the polished wood of the witness stand. The sheer, senseless waste of it all would hit him anew. Two lives, intertwined by love and then hate, both irrevocably damaged. A son caught in the crossfire, all stemming from his own initial crime, yes, but spiraling into a darkness he could never have conceived. It was a stark reminder of how quickly lives can unravel, how bitterness can fester into poison, how the desire for revenge can consume the avenger as much as the target. There was no neat resolution, no happy ending waiting, just the quiet determination to keep living, to find moments of peace, to perhaps eventually help Darius find his own. The story wasn't just about Marcus and Lena anymore. It was a cautionary tale whispered in the city's corners, a grim headline fading from memory, but leaving behind a residue of shock and sadness. A story about the devastating price of betrayal and the long, hard road to finding life after ruin.